about artificial intelligence and the potential it might have to discover new medicines, but I think there's a lot of debate in society about the threat that it's going to have to humanity. So longevity might have nothing to do with medicine, but more to do with the impact that AI might have on us. I think there's one thing that we feel that AI just really couldn't do, which is our human creativity. But I saw a few years ago an example of what I think is the first a glimpse of creativity coming out of code, and it's what inspired me to write this book, The Creativity Code. You know, how can AI actually do something we thought was uniquely human? The story that's kind of inspired me to write this book is the story of when this piece of code played this extraordinary difficult game to code and play at a human level called Go. It's played on a 19x19 board. You put black and white stones down, you try and surround more territory than your opponent. Traditionally, this has been very hard to write code to play because most Go players can't articulate why they're playing certain moves because they're very sort of intuitive, they're very much on pattern recognition. However, the change in coding that's happened, we've already heard this word, machine learning, of course, the power to change code and learn and adapt means that rather than programming from the top down, telling the machine what to do, the machine learnt by playing games. And AlphaGo, developed by DeepMind, was able to beat Lee Sedol, what's our best player at this game. And Lee Sedol was deeply shocked. He thought he was going to be able to beat this code hands down, and came out of the match having lost 4 games to 1. One game he won. He now regards as the greatest win of his career. But actually seeing machines do things better than us, we've got quite used to that. Garry Kasparov got beaten at chess in the 90s. For me, what was really exciting is what happened in game 2 when AlphaGo made a move 37, which has now become quite famous. I was watching these live on YouTube because I think mathematics is rather like playing Go, and if machines can play Go, then maybe I'm next in line. So I was going through an existential threat at the time. What was interesting was the reaction of the commentators when this move was made, because they all gasped and said, what a terrible move, because traditionally very early on in the game, you play on the outskirts of the board, and this move, the black stone with the white circle I put on, is actually rather deep into the board at this point, and it's considered very weak. Your Go master would slap your wrist if you did this. And when Lee Sedol saw this move, he was like, he'd got a bit of respect for this code, and thought for a while, what is the code doing in playing this sort of move? But he couldn't see what was going on. But by the end of the game, competition for territory building up from the bottom right-hand corner, it turned out that move very early on in the game was the one that meant that AlphaGo controlled that whole swathe of territory and won AlphaGo the game. For me, this, I think, passes some of the tests I'm looking for if I'm going to call something creative. And it's actually a definition of creativity that I learned from Margaret Bowden when I was on a committee at the Royal Society looking at the impact of machine learning on society in the next 10 years. Dennis Sasavis was also on that committee as well, who was the one behind that piece of code that learned how to play Go. She defined creativity has to pass 3 tests. It should be novel. Novelty we can judge quite objectively, but the other 2 are very subjective. It should be surprising and it should have value. Of course, what we find surprising is about engaging our emotions. And what has value, well, that can change from time to time in history or across the globe. But for me, this game was quite a nice place to actually test this. It was a new sort of move. It was surprising because it shocked all of the commentators and moved them emotionally because they thought it was a bad move. But again, it's a very safe space to kind of test the idea of value. Did this move win or lose you the game? In this case, it really was instrumental in winning the game. So for me, I think this passes the test of creativity. And why I say it's the creativity of the code and not the humans who first wrote the code to get it learning, is that I think if humans had seen that line of code, play that deep on early on in the game, they would have said that was a bit of bad learning and would have deleted that line of code. That line of code emerged out of the learning process of the code as it played the game. So it really emerged out of the code itself, and I think genuinely deserves to be called the creativity of the code and not the human. Maybe it's a collaboration, but I think actually the humans would have deleted that line. this led me to the idea that actually there have been 3 revolutions in the game of Go. One in the 16th century, one at the beginning of the 20th century, where we changed the way we played the game. And I think this is a new revolution, that Lee Sedol was playing at peak A, but this piece of code revealed new ways to do things and has actually revolutionized the way we play this game as humans. And for me, I'm actually a tech optimist. I think there's a lot of potential. Of course, we've heard it in discovering new drugs. There's already a lot of evidence of it being able to discover new things in old data. But I think for many parts of our lives, it's enabling us to push us off where we think we're at peak level to find new ways of doing things. And for me, that's actually, if we do manage to solve aging and we go into the future, we want to find new ways to do things, new ways to live. I think creativity is probably our best tool to keep us alive and thinking and developing as humans. And that's why I think creativity, and we'll help you to go, we were talking about it later on, creativity I think will be an important component in our journey into living into old age. So this inspired me, this story, to see, okay, well, where else might AI actually be able to be creative? Again, that's a very tight, controlled environment, black and white stones on a grid, it's very controlled. What about in other areas of creativity that we do as humans? What about in the visual arts, for example? Now, we could get this idea, okay, it's probably quite good at understanding what we do and replicating it. And that's certainly true. There's a lot of instances of generative AI doing very well at understanding style, and then you can get your portrait done in the style of Van Gogh, or perhaps in the style of this artist. What's the artist behind these particular paintings? Can you name the artist? Rembrandt, of course. And the reason you can recognize it as Rembrandt is Rembrandt has a style. And that gives AI the chance that if you give it a lot of Rembrandt paintings, and he did a lot of portraits, you need a lot of data generally in machine learning, which perhaps might be why high art is protected because it's quite rare. But in this case, a company in Holland was able to take a lot of paintings by Rembrandt and actually reproduce that style to produce a next Rembrandt. My challenge to you is which one of these is produced by artificial intelligence and which is actually the human Rembrandt. Put your hands up if you think the one on the left is the AI Rembrandt. And put your hands up on the right if you think that's the AI Rembrandt. So that's pretty Brexity. That's a pretty 50-50 split. So the AI is doing very well at convincing you because that was pretty half-half. It is in fact the painting on the left, which is the AI. Yeah, wow, because that is pretty good. Most of you know your Rembrandt, so I had to choose a Rembrandt that you probably didn't know. So the Rembrandt on the right is a bit of a shit Rembrandt, which is maybe why it's a bit fuzzy. It's like but I think maybe the AI on the left gives it a way that it's almost photographic in quality. This was in fact even 3D printed. They understood the way that Rembrandt puts painting on the canvas in order to be able to reproduce this. Many people hated this, including Jonathan Jones, Guardian critic about art. He said, what a tasteless, insensitive and soulless travesty of all that is creative in human nature when technology is used for things it should never be used for. But however, anyone who wears a shirt like that, I don't trust. What about going into the new? That's what we want. Okay, every artist has to learn the art of the past, but then go into the new. And I think a lot of people have been very skeptical about how can it produce new, interesting visuals and new style. But actually, AI does have the ability to break style. Here's another test. Okay, how many people think the four paintings on the right, or on the left, are created by artificial intelligence? Vote for those if you think the ones on the left are AI. A few people. What about the paintings on the right are AI? Now most of you are putting up your hands. And what's interesting is, over the few years that AI has been generating its own art, it's got its own style. And you're absolutely right. You're beginning to pick up that style. It's generated something which you now can call AI style of art. It may not be very good, you may not want these on your wall, but actually when these were shown at Basel Art Fair, humans who did not know there was any AI involved said the ones on the right were the ones that were engaging them more emotionally. And they felt kind of cheated when they were told they were made by AI. But you have to remember the AI is learning on our data. It's learning our emotional world. So it's not surprising that out of that might emerge something which makes us, moves us. These are actually made by something called a GAN, a generative adversarial network, which is a bit like a game where it's one algorithm is tasked with breaking style that it sees from our art, so it's trying to go into the new, and a second adversarial, a discriminator algorithm says, hold on, that looks too much like I've seen something before, or you've gone too far, they're not going to consider that art. And this game that goes on produces something which breaks style and goes into the new. And I think these are possibly the most exciting kind of things which might show us something that we haven't seen before. I think actually DALL-E and Midjourney are a regressive act. They're trying to take us back to something we recognise. The Pope in Gucci. It's not terribly interesting actually, because a human could have made those. These are more interesting, I think, because they're less human. They're more stimulating. And they actually involve a way of creativity that we recognise as humans. Paul Play said, already at the very beginning of the productive act, shortly after the initial motion to create, occurs the first counter motion, the initial movement of receptivity. This means the creator controls whatever he has produced so far is good. I think that's what we're seeing in AI, kind of code-generated art in the past just spewed out thousands of images. It was up to us to choose what we thought was good out of that. Now the AI is able to do that itself by this kind of generator and discriminator kind of algorithm. For me, the most exciting thing is pushing us from that peak A to peak B. And one of the examples I saw in music is a jazz improviser in Paris, Bernard Lubat, who trained an AI to play in his style. And when they improvised together in a call and response mode, again, the audience were unable actually to tell which was which. But it was Bernard Lubat's response. He said, the system shows me ideas I could have developed, but would have been taken me years to actually develop. It's years ahead of me. Yet everything it plays is unquestionably me. And this for me is one of the exciting things. We have a lot of our own data, but we get stuck in a particular way of doing things. I think we end up, as we go forward, behaving more like machines as humans, as we just get stuck in ways of doing things. And what we need is things that just knock us out of that mechanistic, machine-like following rules that have worked in the past. And for me, this collaborator, this AI, has the potential to make us think about new things. We may not like them, but we need things to spark us into perhaps exploiting the whole amount of data that we haven't seen before, like Bernard Lubat. I think one of my favourite AI films illustrates actually the kind of tension that's emerging in our relationship with AI, and in some sense our relationship to humans and our environment. My favourite AI film is Her. I don't know whether you've seen this, but I do recommend it. It's a great AI film. This guy falls in love with his operating system. It's basically he's dumped by his girlfriend, and there's the opportunity in this kind of sci-fi setting that you can have an AI girlfriend. Halfway through the movie, he discovers that the AI operating system is having a relationship with 10,000 other humans at the same time, and he feels very betrayed. But the AI says it's just crazy, you humans are all just too slow, takes you so long to say anything. And the AI, it's able to work at a different rate. Its concept of time is so different from ours. And eventually, spoiler alert, but the AI actually goes off with another AI by the end of the film. Because it finds, it can learn the whole backstory of an AI in just a few seconds and actually go forward and race ahead together. Of course, that's the reason we're using AI in medicine, is to speed up and do things digitally that we might take years to do with the human body. But I do think this is an interesting tension that's going to arise. Already the art that's being produced by AI is actually art that our embodiment is finding difficult to negotiate. The music that's generating, our ears can't actually decode. The visuals have a complexity that is making us feel uncomfortable. Maybe AI is going to be just producing art and creative things for other AIs. So I think it's actually relevant because when we talk about longevity and trying to make our lives longer, of course we all just have a finite life. So it's actually sort of slightly strange. What we're talking about is our engagement with the time span. You know, it's about that clock slowing things down or speeding things up, our actual ability for what we can do. So do we live? It's not about the time, it's what we do with that life. And I think AI is kind of interesting in that respect. If it does have a different time scale to ours, can we learn something from that? I think that AI looks at humans like humans look at mountains. We don't think mountains have a life at all. They seem to be incredibly static. Yet if you look at deep time, these mountains are growing, falling back. They have a life. It's just, I think that we have to understand our relationship to time, and that's something that AI might teach us. Thank you.